Kia ora, good afternoon. Welcome to Connecting the Dots podcast. So, this afternoon I would like to talk about something again that I've been sitting on for a while. I've actually been sitting on this subject for quite a few years, and I had mentioned a few times on various social media accounts and to former students and that this is something that I wanted to study, like when I was developing the occult science field that I'm in, using physics and biometrics and biomagnetics and all that sort of thing, because having a personal experience with the subject matter with my son, it made me curious and made me want to delve further into it. Always sort of keeping in mind that this is something that I wanted to investigate when I did my podcast in the past. Because, I was originally supposed to do these with students and my soon-to-be ex-husband in the past, these podcasts, and going around the world making my shows, teaching my science, my supernatural, occult, paranormal science to everyone, so that I could explain what all of this is about, help children, help people deal with their paranormal experiences, that sort of thing. This is something that I was supposed to be doing, I was working on in 2016 and that, and this is one of those subject matters that I have sat on for a long, long time. And having had an experience with it, like I said, with my son a few years ago, I had always said that this is something that I wanted to look into. But now that I understand biorhythmics, biometric and biomagnetic frequency, and I'm a fully fledged occult scientist now, and I use physics and I use psychology and philosophy, and I'm a metaphysician and biorhythmic engineer and all of that. Now that I'm there, I'm ready to talk about the subject matter, which is haunted dolls and effigies, haunted dolls and haunted effigies. Now, what you need to understand about dolls and effigies, I'll explain the difference between the two. Dolls came about because back in the day, up until like the last sort of really 100 years, the child and infant mortality rate was phenomenal. People were having, like 15 children because they expected at least 10 of them to die before they reached the age of, 7. In Victorian England as well, you didn't name your children until they had their 7th birthday, I believe, because you were expected to die. So most Victorian children didn't even have names. They weren't, a lot of them weren't given names because they weren't expected to survive. And, this wasn't something that was just for, paupers and poor people and that, like, the infant mortality rate around the world for, because like hygiene and living standards, like we used to paint with lead and, and we were surrounded by poisons and toxins, and it wasn't until, things like clean drinking water became a thing and proper sanitation and hygiene and medicine and that antibiotics and all of that became a thing, became kind of widespread, that children started living past childhood, and so then we were having fewer children. But dolls have been around for centuries upon centuries throughout many cultures in the world. Dolls have been a thing, and they came about because the dolls were created in order to capture the likeness of the deceased child, in order for the grieving family or grieving siblings or grieving parents and that to be able to have the likeness of their child with them after death. And in a lot of cultures, they made these dolls with the belief that when the child died, the soul would transfer from the child into the doll, and then the parents and the families would have the doll there, to hold the spirit of the child so that they could mourn and grieve but still have that, the child's energy with them contained within the doll. And then, of course, you have the opposite of that, which is your effigy, which are, more commonly used in, like black magic, like voodoo dolls, that sort of thing, where you have the dolls, you have the effigy that is the definition of the word, the likeness of or the embodiment of. And then you have the effigy that is like, a grotesque form of the likeness of something that is usually built or constructed with the purpose of directing negative energy towards the person that effigy represents. An effigy will also be, with Wicker Man ceremonies, and with like Burning Man. The Burning Man, he would be considered an effigy. I don't know why people flocked to the Burning Man festivals. They are not good things. People don't realise they're taking part in an occult practice of burning the likeness of or the effigy of a man, therefore a human sacrifice. The Burning Man effigy is the equivalent of a human sacrifice without making a sacrifice. And if you notice, there's been a couple of festivals now where men have died at these festivals, where people are starting to die at these festivals. People don't realise when they go to it, they're taking part in an occult ritual where the effigy or likeness of a man is being sacrificed and set on fire, which is the modern day version of the Wicker Man ceremony or the Wicker Man festival. And back in the day, when they used to do the Wicker Man festivals, they would actually put sacrifices of human bodies inside them. People can argue and say, oh no, but you've got to be honest here. There's many a story, like who put Bella in the elm tree. Is it the elm tree? She wasn't a willow. It wasn't a willow tree. I'll have to, but there was a woman, the wych elm, with the wych elm tree. Who put Bella in the wych elm? The woman's body that was found inside the wych elm here in the United Kingdom. That's all part of that festival. There's a lot of villages still in the United Kingdom that secretly do these things, and have done right up until like the 60s and 70s, where they will kill people and hide their bodies inside trees and that, because they're making offerings to, the gods, and especially like the Effigies. I have a Effigy in my book, Andre's Dragon, and the Effigy is like a tree god. And they are said to remove sick and possessed children from the village and take them away. And I mean, history will say that the Effigies would sometimes eat the children, would sometimes eat people, but the Effigy doesn't. In my book, Andre's Dragon, he's called Miro. And without Miro, Andre wouldn't have been able to get into the Shadowlands in order to fight the Goblin King, and make his way through the underworld to begin his ascension, to earn his rite of passage, to begin his ascension, and to obtain the flame of truth, which is the name of his sword that he has to acquire when he goes into the underworld. But he has to fight the Goblin King first, and and so Miro the Effigy helps him, and he sacrifices himself in order to help Andre achieve his mission. And Effigies did remove sick children, but he protects children, and so a lot of people would make effigies in order to please, in Eastern Europe and that, to please the Effigy, to stop him from, eating people in the village. But he didn't. He's very misunderstood. He's a very misunderstood mythological god. He was protective of children. He actually used to remove children that were being beaten and neglected, and he got the blame for a lot of things that he didn't deserve, which is why I wanted to rewrite him and show him in his truest character in my book, Andre's Dragon. He is called for by Anahita, who at the start of the book is a Undine or water goddess. and she calls him forth to protect Andre on a particular part of his journey to help him get to the Shadowlands, because he meets her between the earth and water realms. And so she knows that Andre is a little bit impatient and a little bit of a troublemaker, and he needs to be kind of calmed down in that. So she calls on Miro, the Lishi, to accompany him so far on his quest, to help guide him and teach him and ground him and earth him, because, you know, he is, Miro is a tree god. But he is a very misunderstood one and doesn't deserve the mythological reputation that he's got, because he's actually a protector of children. And Andre, you know, as a young man, you know, he is representative of my ascension journey, of the journey I have gone through. And he is in the book kind of centered around being sort of in his late teens, early 20s, which is when, you know, when you're going through puberty and all that sort of thing, your energy levels are really messed up. When you're at the start of puberty, right up until you're about 22 years old, your hormones and your, you know, chemical compositions in your brain and your biorhythmic and biometric frequencies, you know, aren't in alignment, in that you create paranormal activity, poltergeist activity, kinetic disruptions, that sort of thing. And when we have dolls like the three that I'm going to talk about, it is very easy to transfer. It is very easy for a child to transfer their energy onto their doll. Now, if you look in the case of Robert and Akiku, they were very loved by the children who had them, Robert and Akiku, you know, and, you know, Robert treated his doll, he named his doll after him. He treated Robert like he was, you know, like an extension of himself. Now, I'm a mum, so I know how this works. You know, he used to blame Robert for everything that used to go wrong, and people used to say, well, you know, the doll's evil, he's possessed, yada yada. But I've got two young boys who are very attached to their plushies and their toys, and there has been many a time when my youngest, especially when he was very little, used to blame things that went wrong on his toys. So, you know, I think that in regards to everything that's happened with Robert, I think it's more that people have kind of taken an idea or a misunderstanding and run with it, and given this doll that was loved by a little boy with, you know, who had an incredible imagination. I mean, he became a writer and an artist, and that clearly Robert, who owns the doll Robert, was a creative, empathic child, and he lived in a world of wonder and imagination, and it was something that wasn't nurtured with him, you know, in regards to Robert the doll. And so, you know, in trying to bring Robert to life with the family around him, the boy Robert tried to give the doll Robert personality and character, which just flew over the heads of everybody in his family, because they didn't understand him, because he was a creative, empathic child. I, on the other hand, if you look at my Instagram videos that I've made with my boys and my YouTube channel, there's a video in there with my son with his plushie Ronald the Raven. I completely encourage it. I have fully embraced and support my boys' incredible imaginations when it comes to the personalities that they have given all their plushies. My boys' plushies have names, they have backstories, they have personalities, they have characters. And, you know, it's because of fueling their imagination when they were little, and that they're so creative and imaginative now, which we are turning into, you know, our video games and, you know, my books and my radio children's matinee, and that, like, we've turned all of this into this entertainment empire, this occult entertainment empire that, you know, we're starting to build for you now. So if you go to my old Instagram, Barefoot Warrior Woman, if you go further down, you'll actually see little skits that I've done with my boys, where we're using their plushies and they're giving them character and names, and, you know, they've got accents and personalities, and we're putting on little skits because we're planning on having on our little YouTube video on our social media when this is all over and we're in Canada and we're building our lives and blah blah blah, to do little like Muppets and the Fraggle Rocks and all that, but with plushies and that, just little snippets of little comedy snippets and that, just to because my sons and I live a supernatural life, we live in a supernatural world. We use comedy and humor to break up the seriousness of what it is that I have to deal with and that they have to watch me deal with. And this brings me to the whole reason why I wanted to study dolls and the effects that dolls have on humans, energetically. Because as after I had my boys, I had to have 3 hernia repair surgeries. I had an umbilical and 2 para-umbilical hernias where my stomach muscle split open and my stomach fell through, and I had to have 3 giant meshes to hold my stomach in place. And I got, like, for 6 years I had to battle severe infections. I was on regular drugs and medication, like diazepam, dihydrocodeine, all lots of different kinds of morphines, oxycontins, Lyrica, is that what it's called? I had to see pain specialists and doctors all up and down the country and that to help me deal with the aftermath of dealing with meth rejection. Meth? Not quite. Meth. No, I said it again. Mesh. No, mesh. Get it right, Debbie. Mesh rejection. My stomach, like around my belly button and that, I've actually got like a smiley face from where they had to do all the laparoscopic surgeries and then gut me open, and it looks like I've got like 2 eyes, a nose and a mouth under my belly button because of the mesh rejection. And my skin was rotting and that because I just kept getting infection after infection after infection. I got fatter and fatter and fatter. None of the pain medication was working, and I just didn't want to keep taking something and putting all those chemicals in my body that wasn't doing anything, which is why I switched to smoking weed. I was actually, when I went to see the pain specialist in Scotland, he prescribed me, I think it's called Lyrica. And it was supposed to be like the be all and end all of, pain medication. And he said to me, just as we were getting ready to leave Scotland to come to the United Kingdom, to come to England, sorry, he said, and if that doesn't work, you can always try weed. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I know it's illegal, but nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Like, it has great medicinal purposes, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, but you didn't hear it from me, sort of thing. And of course, it didn't work. My body just doesn't like medication, and so I started taking little samples of weed, which is what got me into this mess with my ex-husband, who tried to fake opioid addiction through me smoking the weed and all that sort of thing. And I admitted to the police that I smoked it for pain, but I only ever smoked it when I was in absolute excruciating pain. And because I had no income and I couldn't afford it, I had to rely on my ex-husband to help me, get money for it most of the time, 99% of the time. And when I couldn't afford it, when I didn't have access to it, my baby boy, my schmoopy-doo, Gabriel, has a plushie, a soft toy, a Minecraft plushie. He calls him Pixel, and he's an endo dragon. He's a very large black and purple endo dragon from Minecraft that he calls Pixel. And a few years ago, and I'm talking at least 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, writhing around in pain. I wasn't smoking weed really back then. I didn't have the money. I didn't know where I could get it from. It was just by pure luck if I ever met anyone that could find it for me. And when I did find a guy, he was, quite a drive away. So I, more often than not, went without it than I went with it. I tried to just kind of brave it. And my little boy one day said to me, I know what can help you with your pain, Mummy. And he ran into his room and he came back with his plushy pixel. And I swear to you, even, I was going to say even to this day, but I haven't seen my boys for well over a year and a half now. I've seen them through doors and windows. Sorry. It's the longest, like I raised my babies in my arms, literally carrying them around in my arms. There wasn't a day that went by where they weren't in my arms. And this is what my ex-husband did, you know it. I haven't been able to hold my babies. But what I will say is right up until last year, when all of this happened, sorry, wasn't expecting that. My boy used to get Pixel and put him on my tummy, and I swear to you, the pain would instantly go away. As soon as that toy landed on, was placed on my tummy, the pain would instantly disappear. And I used to wonder, with my scientific mind, is it the love that my son has for Pixel is what is healing my pain, or is it the love that my son has for me that is healing the pain? And he's using Pixel as the conduit for the healing. Like my son, I'm very, very close to my sons. They are my best friends. I am their best friends. We are a very tight, close knit unit, and they went to war to defend me. And I have gone through all of this to protect and defend them. And my sons love me as much as what I love them, and so whenever I'm dealing with pain, he goes and gets Pixel and he lays him on my stomach. And so I remember saying to a couple of my students in the past, I've always wondered whether it was because like he loves Pixel so much, like Pixel's one of his closest, most beloved toys, and that love that he put into Pixel was then, put onto me as soon as I touched Pixel, or whether it is the love that my son has for me, that he's put that love into Pixel to pass on to me. Do you know what I mean? So, I had to look at all of that. And now that I understand, biorhythmic frequencies and biomagnetic fields, and, I had done a video podcast a couple of years ago called Energy is passed on like an STD, or energy is transferred like an STD. I'll put a link in the description box so you can see it. But it's basically talking about, the energy, whatever we touch is transferred onto other things and to other people. So like I always say, if you suddenly have a bout of depression, and you don't know where it's come from, look at who you've been in contact with within the last 24 to 48 hours. Because it is more likely than not that someone you've been around or someone you've been in communication with has put their energy onto you, and you've absorbed it like a sponge, and you're reflecting it out, you're reflecting it back. Well, with Robert and Akiku, I think the energy was passed on, to the adults, and then when they died, legends were born. Now, the thing with Akiku and her growing hair, this is one of the reasons why I've been holding off making this podcast, because of the fact that there's been reports of her hair growing. Now, what you need to understand is that Akiku is a porcelain doll, and porcelain expands and contracts. It stretches and it shrinks depending on the weather. Porcelain has been known to shrink by quite a bit in the summer times and puff up quite a bit in the winter times, because with moisture, with dryness, porcelain is made from like baked clay, and so that can be a lot of the explanation why her hair, which they examined, is human hair. It's a child's, made from children's hair. You know, it could be the reason why her hair apparently seems to grow. Now, there's photos on the internet of a kiku in her shrine, and with, you know, long hair and with short bobbed hair. But if you have a look of the doll with the short bobbed hair, it is not the same doll. You can tell it's not the same doll for one of two reasons. Firstly, her face is round, whereas the original doll's face isn't like a chubby round child's face, and it's clean. If you look at a Kiku's real doll, the one that's in the shrine, you can tell she's like a 115-year-old doll. You can tell she's an old doll. Her face is dirty. You know, she looks worn. She looks loved. Whereas the one where she's apparently got the cut short bobbed hair, um, she's clean faced and she's round. Now these monks and that are looking after her won't let scientists go near her or touch her. You have to ask why. They haven't cleaned her yet in these photos where she's apparently got the shorter hair. Her face is spotless. So I think there might be a bit of, you know, trickery going on here as far as a kiku is concerned. And I think that, you know, when you're dealing with grieving parents, because she died very suddenly from malaria, it was very unexpected. She died very quickly, and the brother and the parents were left absolutely devastated, and they transferred that energy of their grief onto the doll. And then somehow it all got blown out of proportion. You know, we've all had times, if you've got dolls, like I've got dolls, I've got my doll Donna that I've had since I was a very little girl. You know, there are times where I was convinced her eyes were moving, and that, you know, there's, you know, claims of dolls' eyes moving on video. I was watching one on YouTube the other day, and I just wanted to yell because this woman was standing with this doll behind her in an attic. I should have kept a link, but it was one of those things where it was like 15 blahs of the blah, or, you know, I think it might have been one of those ones where it was a marathon that was 3 hours long, and it would have just taken forever to direct to this video. But she's utterly convinced that the doll's eyes are moving, but you can tell by the doll when she's in the attic and the doll's behind her that the doll's eyes are detached from the head, so they're not like where the eyes are part of the face and structure of the doll. The eyes are separate to the doll, so they've made the doll's head with hollow eyes, and then they've popped eyes in behind like artificial eyes, which means probably at some point they could move up and down. You know, they were eyes that we've all had dolls, like my doll Donna, her eyes move up and down. She's got eyelashes and they can move up and down, and if this is an old doll, maybe they've gotten stuck, or you know, but it's not hard to give the illusion of lips and eyes moving, especially when it comes to using video cameras and phones, because when you're dealing with, you know, digital imagery, the chip in the phone can do glitches in a way that can give the appearance of things that aren't real, false illusions, you know. And so with a kiku, I think, you know, when you're dealing with cellular memory as well, you know how you hear about people who have had like heart transplants or liver transplants and that, and they've taken on the attributes of the person who donated the organ to them. They'll suddenly start drinking beer when they never drank beer before. They'll suddenly like heavy metal music when they only ever liked classical or pop, or, you know what I mean? That's because of cellular memory. You know, that can be transferred onto, especially because, you know, she had malaria. She never went anywhere without a kiku, and she would have cried and sweat and, you know, vomited and all that sort of thing. Like that could have been absorbed into the doll, and even just the fear of her death and the grief of her passing would have absolutely been absorbed into the porcelain, because it's clay and human hair. You know, it's and because she had like cotton and satin clothes and that. So they're all natural organic materials that that doll would have absolutely absorbed, and then anyone who's sensitive to that energy would have picked up on it any time they were around her. So that explains a kiku. So these dolls, they're not haunted, they're not possessed. They were loved by children, and that's what you need to understand. When they're loved by children, and the children are giving them personalities and backstories and making them a part of their life, that shows a lot of the purity and innocence of the love of a child, that they can make their imagination come to life through these inanimate objects. Now, with the story of animal, just don't even get me started. Oh my god. See, when we get to Canada and I open the Alchemist Cavern, because I'm going to be going around doing these shows, and if people invite me to their homes to do investigations, especially when it comes to children, like if there are parents dealing with anything involving children who are experiencing things or have gifts, I want to go there. I want to fix, like one of the reasons why I wanted to do these shows traveling around is many years ago, there was a show called Psychic Kids, and it used to enrage me the way that these children were treated by like the stuff they were being told, the things they were being forced to do, the way they were being treated by family members and their schools, and that being put into asylums, put on medication, simply because they were going through the metamorphic stage of puberty, from the pupae, from the larva stage of their spiritual development. They were going through a metamorphosis, and their biorhythmic frequencies weren't in alignment. They were picking up on energy and frequencies around them, no different to a radio station or TV station picking up signals from a satellite. They were classed as mentally ill and being put on medication, and it enraged me. And then of course the same thing happened to me, as we know, which I am absolutely fighting to get my name cleared, because these doctors that deal with the psychological mind mostly are idiots when it comes to, they don't understand what they're talking about. When it comes to the paranormal and the supernatural and the occult, they know nothing. They don't know anything about physics. They don't know anything about quantum mechanics, or I only know what I know. And biorhythmics and that, they know nothing, and all they do is treat the symptoms and not the cause. So instead of sitting there like I do and going back to their childhood traumas, to their past life traumas, past life events, PTSD and that sort of thing of their childhood growing up, and finding the root cause of why they are the way they are, or being able to just simply be able to explain to them, no, don't worry, you're not being haunted, you're dealing with a time slip or a time bend, which is why I wrote my books, the Anahita Wych series. You Have No Power Over Me, and dealing with the boogeyman and seeing things with red eyes, and ghosts in the closet and that sort of thing. Like, I've written these books to help children understand what it is they're dealing with, and it can be just as simple as sitting them down and saying, this is what you're dealing with and this is all you have to do to fix it. And they're like, oh, and then boom, they do it and everything goes away, because then they realize they're not crazy. They're just dealing with supernatural entities and supernatural forces that nobody was able to explain to them before. But what counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists do, because they don't understand any of it, because they're very close-minded, they're basically just glorified drug dealers, they're glorified pharmacists. And all they do is, well, what pill can I give them to stop them from connecting to God? What pill can I give them to make them sleep so they're not waking up when they hear the noises in their room? And then they just assume, well, if they're hearing voices, then it's disembodied voices, that it must be schizophrenia, and like all that sort of nonsense. And so I truly believe that I had to go through what I went through, because it helped me finish putting my my biorhythmic field generator together to help me deal with the pain of my, the medication I was being forced to take because of the lies of my ex-husband. I was vomiting so much every day going into anaphylaxis because, as I said before, I can't take medication. I can't have any sort of chemicals around my body because I instantly, have allergic reactions. So I was being forced to take this little blue tablet. And every time I kind of exhibited any signs of being proud of being an Indigenous woman, they upped my medication. So twice a day, I was going into anaphylaxis and I was vomiting so much. I've got photos up on my Instagram, on my Barefoot Warrior Woman, and on my LinkedIn as well. I was vomiting so much that the scars from my hernia surgeries and even my C-section scars split open and got infected. And I was refused medical treatment for weeks. And I got really sick, and my kidneys were shutting down because I wasn't being fed food. I was going up to 5 days without food. I'd go to the cafeteria, and they wouldn't have any food for me because I have a gluten allergy and I'm allergic to eggs. So I have a very strict diet, and they weren't accommodating that diet, and so I was slowly dying. Like, my heart was giving out, my kidneys were giving up. My belly button was getting so infected. I stunk of rotting flesh and infection. My C-section scar split open, and you could see like subcutaneous tissue. And I had to take salt packets from the cafeteria to pour into my wounds after I'd washed them. I'd have to wash them 3 times a day. And I had hidden like a little stash of salt packets in my bag so that I could wash out my infection with pure salt and water, and I would have to lay there and just sometimes it could take like 3 hours for the pain to subside in order to deal with the infection. Eventually I was given treatment because I was to the point of near collapse. Eventually I went to one of the nurses that I actually trusted, and when she saw it, she went absolutely ballistic, and she was on it like a car bonnet. And it took them about 4 or 5 weeks to treat it because, again, I couldn't take antibiotics. They tried to give me an antibiotic cream, but the first one didn't work, and so it wasn't working quick because I was only supposed to be on it for a certain amount of time. I ended up being on it for about 4 or 5 weeks. And then the one kind of medication that I thought I used to be able to take for pain and that, they put me on for a 2-week trial, and I ended up allergic to that as well. So I ended up having to perfect biorhythmics to help me deal with the pain. But then because my ex-husband got my phone taken off me, I couldn't use my phone because I was using energy through my phone to lay on my wounds. So then I had to come up with other ways to do it. And then that's when I came up with the idea of an organic biorhythmic field generator, so that when my boys and I go out onto these shows to do these shows, I can go anywhere in the world, regardless of the season, regardless of the terrain, whether it's snow, sand, nighttime, daytime, heat, cold, autumn leaves, whatever, anywhere in the world with an organic biorhythmic field generator. And I can do what I have to do in order to remove the energy and lift the energy, like going to where Henry McCabe, Rush Lake and all that. I can go to these places and do what I have to do, and I don't have to worry about using batteries or USB chargers and that when using my biorhythmic field generator to go out on location. Now, obviously, when I go to do these investigations, I'm going to be dealing with people who are dealing with haunted or perceived possessed, haunted, cursed objects, and I'm going to take them and I'm going to cleanse them and either offer them back to them, or if they don't want them back, and I'm going to have a postal address so people around the world can post their objects and things to me, and I'm going to put them in a museum at the Alchemist Cavern, because I'm going to have like a supernatural, occult, paranormal museum, but where it's educational, because I'm having a education centre as well. So I'm going to, these podcasts like I'm doing now, I'm going to have guides give talks and explain why they were possessed or why they were cursed, or that sort of thing, and explain it to people, and then they're not going to be afraid. But because a lot of people would be afraid to have these objects back in their house, even knowing that I'd cleansed them, most people don't want to keep them, so they give them to me and then I deal with them. Even a few years ago, I've had people from all over the world post me things where I've had to go and bury them somewhere and deal with them and do a cleansing and do a this and do a binding. The amount of bindings I've done for people who have sent me things from America, like, it's unbelievable. So I'll be able to do all this sort of stuff, and I will hold a museum, and I will keep things in there, but for educational purposes, because the Alchemist Cavern is also going to be an education centre as well, to help children. And I'm going to train my staff up to be able to give talks and teach the children and answer all these sorts of questions. And basically they can help spread my light, spread my work, and carry on my legacy, through the Alchemist Cavern Museum and Education Centre. Which brings me to Annabelle. I just these people, Lorraine and Ed Warren. Movies were made about this doll. There's been a whole mass hysteria about this doll, and yet there's no actual recorded evidence that anything has ever happened in any way with this doll. It's just that you were dealing with a nurse, a nursing student, so she would have been, quite young, maybe teens, early 20s, with the stress of being a student. In 1971, she was given Annabelle as a gift, and then apparently all these things started happening in the house that was attributed to Annabelle. But you were dealing with a woman who was around other people who were empathic, other people who were ill, depending on where she was at that stage in her nurse's training. She could have been going into hospitals, dealing with real patients, dealing with real things, dealing with death and stress and all that sort of thing. And so she would have been coming back and, putting that onto her doll that was made from, organic materials like cotton and fibres and, all that sort of thing. And then the poor doll got the blame. And then, of course, the mistake was made is that Ed and Lorraine Warren got bought in, and because everything with them is possessed, like with the whole Amityville ghost boy, and like everything was possessed and demonic, and she needed to be removed and blah blah blah. And yet there's been no reported incident, like there's no documented or reported incidents of anything other than this girl saying, once I got the doll in the house, strange things started happening. But because she was training to be a nurse, she wouldn't have known. She was at a certain level of being an empath, like creative empath, being, the highest frequency empath there is. You have, high frequency empaths and lower frequency empaths, and your lower frequency empath is your general empath, and then your high frequency empaths are your creative empaths, and they are the ones that need the most nurturing, because they're the ones whose minds and whose energy can be very dangerous when they're going through their, metamorphic stages of their ascension. And we go through many from birth right up until we die. Like we are, creative empaths are always in a stage of, metamorphic change. We never stay the same. We are always changing because we are always ascending. You never stop learning. You never stop being a student. You just go from, from one phase to the next as you grow and develop. And because nobody has ever been able to put a name to all of this paranormal and supernatural activity, and nobody's ever sort of really been able to put an explainable science to it, the gods created me. And so here I am. And so my podcasts and my shows are out there explaining all of this sort of thing, so that when we hit the road and, we get to Canada and open our store, and, we can put it all out there with our video games and, my books and our little shows and all that sort of thing. We can reach people far and wide, and, we can help the children. I started all of this to help the children. And I want to bring people in, get staff in, train them up. They'll go on I'll take them on a training session where they'll have like a good few weeks training before we open the store, and they'll have to be tested for their knowledge, and I'll take them on shows with me, and they can listen to all my podcasts and that, so that they can learn and study. They will properly learn and study, because if they have people, tourists and members of the public coming to them, going to the Alchemist Cavern and going to the museum, or taking their kids to the education centre, if they have questions about anything, there won't be a single member of my staff that won't be able to answer it and help them. And then, like when I'm not around, when I'm out recording and that, if anyone is dealing with any sort of paranormal activity, then members of my staff will go and take a biorhythmic field generator with them and deal with the problem and help the people, free of charge, obviously. And, then I've got people helping me and my son spread the light, healing the planet one step at a time. And then, my staff in their free time, they can go off and do what they want, with investigations and things like that. And, I'll teach people that way. So the thing with Annabelle is that basically, what did someone say? Because Ed said it was possessed, we just assumed it was possessed. Like, they took their word for it that there was something wrong with the doll, and there's nothing wrong with the doll. And it's just that because people have a slight fear of dolls, especially things like Chucky in the movie The Dolls, which is one of the movies that my dad and I watched when I was younger, and even to a lesser extent, some people are freaked out by the Toy Story, inanimate objects that look human freak people out. And, people say, oh, we don't know why, but I know why. And it's because historically, dolls were created to capture the souls of dead children, to embrace and hold the souls of the dead children, so that the families and the siblings could hold the doll and grieve the loss of that child, with the belief that the doll had embodied the soul of the child because it embodied the likeness of it, and this is one of the reasons why I really admire Amish people. Their dolls have no faces, and they kind of look a little bit like blank voodoo dolls, but their dolls have no faces. They don't give them faces and that, because they don't want to promote things like vanity, and they don't want to like sexualize the dolls and that sort of thing. And I think that's pretty cool. I understand that side of it, but then you have your effigies, which are your voodoo dolls, and the dolls that are like your Chuckies and that sort of thing, that take on the negative side of what a doll or an effigy is about. I mean, if you look, how teddy bears came about, and incidentally, like Robert the doll is a Steiff bear, and Steiff were the ones that make the most famous teddy bears. The teddy bear came about because the hunters wanted Theodore Roosevelt to shoot the baby bear, and he refused to do it. So instead, they made a teddy bear as an effigy to, honor the spirit of the baby bear that he saved. And now we have teddy bears and that. But, the teddy bear was an effigy of this baby bear that they wanted the president to kill, and thankfully he refused to do it. So, you do need to be careful when you're buying your plushies and that. If you understand where they came from and what they were originally for, it gives you a greater respect for them. But also at the same time, if your child has a relationship with their dolls or their toys or their action figures or whatever, let them, like if they're not hurting anyone, even if they're blaming mishaps and accidents on the dolls, like that's all par and parcel. Kids will lie and deny things. Did you have the last cookie when I told you not to? No, I didn't. Even at like 2-3 years old, you see it on YouTube, kids will lie if they think they're going to get into trouble. and they will blame the doll, or they'll blame the dog, or whatever. So, let your child embrace their plushies, please, because it helps fuel their imaginations. It helps bring a world to life for them. Um, every child should be allowed to be a child. It's so wrong that we are forcing children to grow up years before their time. And I have always let my children be children. I let them have their plushies and their toys, and they're 13 and 14 now. They're obviously growing out of it, but they still have so much love for their plushies and their toys. They are convinced that they will never get rid of them, so I'm going to have to buy a big house in Canada just to store all their plushies that will end up being like robots, and that they'll be showing in my museum long after I'm gone. This is Thomas Callaghan's Parlo, and this is Gabriel Callaghan's Gronk, and all that sort of thing. And they'll be like 200-year-old falling apart, going on antique roadshow plushies, and that talking about the famous, most beloved Tiffany plushie cat of my boy, who was blamed for everything. Tiffany's the most evil cat in the world. He's diabolical. He's a pure white cat, with a pink collar on. His name is Tiffany, and he is absolutely diabolical. And him and Ronald got blamed for everything, except Ronald Ronald denies it. Tiffany doesn't. So anyway, so I'll put links in the description box below so that you can check out these dolls. Obviously, these other famous dolls as well, but these are the most famous. These spawned legends and movies and all that sort of thing. So just be careful what you're bringing into your home or what you are around when it comes to embracing the likeness of humans, like with the Burning Man festival and, the Wicker Man and all that sort of thing. There's occult symbolism and all of this stuff that can do a lot of damage to your spiritual development. You can incur karma. It's because I'm going to pause it and have a drink of water. Just give me a sec. So these can leave karmic imprints on your energetic fiber or on your soul that can become real problems for you later if you don't realize and understand what it is you're dealing with. You were talking about pagan activity. You are talking about Wicca practices. You're talking about Druidism. You're talking about these ancient practices that, when they were first originally practiced, they involved animal and human sacrifices. A lot of them were child and virgin sacrifices as well. And that all carries forward. The energy of what was in the past carries forward into the future. Even if you put different clothes on it and call it Bob, it is still originating from something that was, occult, black magic, and dark and sinister in its nature, in its earliest form. And it's just been changed to suit the times because, unfortunately, we still have sacrifices going on. But for those that don't want to deal with that side of it, they will use effigies instead. They will use the likenesses of things instead. Even things like gargoyles, or grotesques that they put in stately homes and outside churches and that sort of thing. They are effigies as well. They are talismans and that were put on the front of buildings to scare negative spirits away, and they're just marble or stone forms of like dolls and effigies. So if you arm yourself with the knowledge, then you know what you're dealing with. And then if your child is coming out and saying these things, or you think that this stuff is going on, now you know what you're dealing with and you know what to look at, and that just don't take the internet's word on it. You like, people need to expand their minds a little bit more and not just take someone's face value on it. Just because somebody has 100,000 or millions of followers on their YouTubes or their, their Insta X's or whatever, doesn't mean that they're an expert in what it is they're talking about. Just because it gets a lot of likes and subscribes and shares and watches and that doesn't mean that what they're showing you is real. It doesn't mean that what they're saying is fact. So just be careful what you believe in. If you're not sure, if you don't know what it is you're dealing with, guys, just come to me. I'll leave my email. You can come to my Twitter, leave a message on my Twitter. I mean, I don't use my Instagram anymore, but if you want, you can DM me on my old Instagrams. Or, like I said, email me. I'll put it in the description box below, and you can just message me and ask me, and then I will help you. And I'm only going to be honest with you. So if you don't like what I'm telling you, that's going to be on you, but I'm only going to be honest. I do not lie, and I will not lie to stroke someone's ego, and I don't care if you're considered like a famous psychic or famous paranormal investigator or whatever. If you're doing anything wrong, I'm going to call you out for it. It's because of people like that it's made my work so much harder, because the popular consensus, just because popular opinion doesn't make it true. Okay. So, just because it's a popular opinion doesn't mean that it's a true opinion. It doesn't mean that it's truth. And I'm a high priestess, I'm a gatekeeper, I'm an ascended master. It is my job to tell you the truth. It was through me telling the truth that I ended up in this mess with my ex-husband, because he's on the wrong side of what it is I'm dealing with, and I call people out as I see it. So anyway, so if you have any questions, I'll put my email in the box, or message me on Twitter. If you've got any objects, like send me a photo, explain the situation, tell me what's going on, and I will show you how to fix it, especially if you're dealing with children or you're a teenager and there's things going on that you don't understand. It doesn't matter how silly you think it is. It doesn't matter how dark and twisted you think it is. I'm an occult scientist. I've dealt with the full gambit, from infant sacrifices to animal sacrifices to, like, I've dealt with it all. Like, so nothing you say is going to shock me. No reaction that you have is going to shock me. Just don't try and come at me pretending to be the devil, because I have a lot of people coming at me trying to be like, oh, I am Satan, blah, blah, blah. But Satan's a good guy. So coming to me being Satan isn't going to scare me, because Satan's a friend of mine, because all Satan is God when he's angry. When God is really angry and his wrath comes out, he turns into Satan. Satan does not punish innocent people. He punishes sinners. And the devil tempts the soul of the weak to Satan. So the Satan will send the devil out to convert people to the dark side, so that he can then test the strength of your soul, to pull you into hell, to deal with your sins, so that your dark side can be removed from the earth. Just like God sends Jesus out to convert people to the light, to test your strength. God sends Jesus to test people's purity, and then offers them ascensions if they have, if they show signs of having a pure heart. The devil is the same, because everything is dual, like, mama wata. Every god has a dual nature, because all gods are all elements, and all elements are dual nature. What he gives with one hand, he takes with the other, sort of thing. So so just don't even bother with that sort of stuff, because I'll just laugh, because Satan lives to punish bad people. He does not take. It's impossible for someone who is innocent and pure of heart to enter the gates of hell, because their frequency is too high. As soon as they die, or as soon as they're anywhere near that sort of stuff, God, the light, comes and saves them and takes them away. Whereas, like, people need to understand as well, when you're dealing with the occult and with black magic and devil worship, when you're making sacrifices, the Bible says, don't sacrifice an offering to me that which I already own. That goat is mine, that bull is mine. Why are you killing it in my name when it's already mine? It belongs to me. I own it. Its soul is mine. So why are you killing it to give me something that I already own? It's like stealing. It's like stealing my car to give my car as a gift. That sort of thing. So when you're hearing about these people, well, I use the term lightly when I say people, because they're inhuman. When they sacrifice animals and humans, to offer them up to the devil, and that they're not pleasing the devil when they take these lives. They're pleasing the devil because they've sinned and handed their own life over. So they'll, when they kill someone, when they take a life, the instant that victim crosses over, God takes them immediately, because they're innocent, pure, if they're animals and children, or virginal or whatever, God takes them instantly, and what's left is the blackened heart or the blackened soul of the one who's committed the crime against the pure and innocent. So then the devil goes, ha ha, and rubs his hands together and says, you walked right into my trap. I knew you were dark. I knew you were twisted. I knew you were evil. I knew you were going to do something to try and please me. You did. And now your soul belongs to my father, Satan. And then Satan comes in, and you're doomed. You're damned for all time, because you gave in to the temptations of the devil. The devil was there to tempt the sins out of you, whereas Jesus is there to promote your purity. So so you're not pleasing the devil by offering up a sacrifice of a human or animal life. You're pleasing the devil because he won the bet. You were as evil as what he thought you were, and you proved him right. And so, he's happy to let the victim go to the kingdom of heaven, to be reincarnated and, be born into something even more pure and innocent, where you often get to choose what it is you want to come back as, or if you want to come back at all. And then he gets to collect your soul, because, he won the bet. He knew you could be easily tempted, because the devil is there to tempt you. Jesus is there to guide you. God is there to evolve your soul, to help you become an ascended spirit, an ascended master. And Satan is there to teach you a lesson when it all goes wrong. And you often end up, being in purgatory for a really long time, because until he feels that it is right for you to come back and try again, you'll start on the lowest level of evolution and have to keep working your way up. Live, die, live, die, live, die, and keep evolving every time. So, getting it right this time. I'm here on this earth with the story to tell and the science I have created, with the message I am putting out to say to people, if you get it right now, if you get it right this time, you won't need to have to come back and do it again next time, and it won't be as hard if you do, because you will get a choice. There will be, bigger options and, more of a selection. If you ascend your soul now, if you deal with all your childhood traumas and your, past life traumas, and, because I can tell you what your past life traumas are just by looking at the lines on your wrist. I only have to sit with you for an hour, and I'm going to know exactly what we're dealing with and what you need to do to pay off karmic debt, close off karmic cycles, deal with childhood traumas and that sort of thing, which is, one of the reasons why I want to do my radio show, my late night talkback radio, because then people can come in or call in or email in or message in or whatever, and, then I will be able to help them live on air. So yeah, so I'm here, and I have walked this path, and I have lived this life, and I have been put on this journey so that I could come to you now and say, this is who I am, this is what I know, this is what I can do, this is what I'm going to do to help you and your children and your ancestors and your descendants, and that all evolve together, so that when your time comes to cross over, to go over to the light, whether it is to become part of the universe, or to join your ancestors, or go to heaven, or wherever it is you believe you go to after you die, and whoever it is you believe created you, you know, I'm here to help you get it right this time. My whole revealing my supernatural abilities and my gift and all that, has come at a great cost to me. More than you will. Well, I mean, you probably do know most of it. If you know my story, everything that I've had to do. I've had to walk through fire just to get to this point, and I'm just waiting to get my son so that we can go and bring the rest, like open the doors up to the world and show you the other side of what it is we're dealing with, the creation frequency or the atomic frequency, because for a few decades now, quite a few decades, we've been dealing with the Schumann resonance, and I'm going to show you the atomic frequency. I'm going to open the doors up to the universe and say to you, come closer, look inside, see what's available to you, and heal. Okay, so I'll put links in the description box below. This one's a little bit of a long one, but there was a lot to say, because it's all par and parcel. It's all dealing with the occult, it's all dealing with the paranormal, and I'm trying to educate you all, especially in terms with helping your children. And I promise you, once I get my books published and I get my games out there, and I've got my alchemist cavern and all of that up, with my education centre and that sort of thing, and my radio station especially, which as soon as my boys and I are together and we've got a place to call home, I'm going to set up my radio station, from the internet, have an internet radio station, and I'll start from there. And then I'm going to, when I open the alchemist cavern, I'll move my radio station into the alchemist cavern, into like a little tower, and people can watch the shows being made, and things being recorded, like the children's matinee. They can come and listen outside to hear us putting on the voices and that, as we're recording the children's stories to play on a Sunday morning, and that sort of thing. Like tourists and that can sit outside and watch it, and maybe even sometimes be a part of it, because I do want to open this experience up to the public. And if someone wants to come and lend a voice to a character of a new story and that, and they've got the right voice and the right attitude and that, then I would absolutely love to get them on board, and take them into the recording studio and let them be a voice in one of my books, or one of my son's books, because we're both writing stories. So yeah, so link in the description box below, links in the description box below. I know I've messed up a lot with my words, but I'm dehydrated. I've not been eating a lot today, and I've got to cook my dinner, because I like to go at least 16 to 18 hours keto, so I like to have an early dinner. And I keep thinking I've got to go and cook my dinner, and I'm just too tired. So I'm thinking, do I want to cook, or should I just have toast and a cup of tea? So anyway, I will speak to you later. I will put my email in the thing below, and my links to Twitter and Instagram. I mean, I don't use Instagram, but if you don't have Twitter, you can message me on Instagram. But I would prefer Twitter. But whatever, or email me. And if you have any questions, or you need help with anything, or you want me to look at any photos or any objects and that, like, I will be able to tell you and help you fix it and know what to do. And if you've got any children dealing with anything, or teenagers, if you're a teenager or a young person and you're dealing with anything, or I mean, it doesn't matter your age, you know where I am. I'll put my email in, I'll put the links into my socials, and in the meantime, hold your head up, know you are loved. Ka kite anō. Mwah.